So I was just on the Mike and Brooker podcast. That's with Mike Guadango and Mike Brooker. And then I was on there with Rolf Oman, who's a track guy. The topic was essentially like whether or not you should use cleans or not use cleans. It kind of got all murky because it originally was going to be a debate between me and Mike. And then Mike decided to have Rolf Oman on the podcast. And it just ended up not being like set up as a formal debate. So it was just more of an open discussion. And it kind of went in a lot of different directions where Rolf Oman spoke a lot more than I did. Anyways, I appreciate Mike for having me on. Mike is an awesome dude. I want to get into the background of how I got in contact with Mike and where it all kind of stemmed from. Mike's awesome. Me and him have talked on the phone a bunch now. He checks in on me all the time. Mike is a really genuine dude. But yeah, I just want to give my review on that podcast. I've gotten a lot of messages from people. Mike says he's gotten a lot of messages from people. And I guess Rolf Oman has gotten a lot of messages from people too. A lot of feedback in a lot of different directions. So the training session today, I'm gonna hit some power cleans, then I'm gonna do a bunch of upper body. I'm gonna bench press, incline press, dumbbell row. I wanna do everything outside today because it's so nice out. I got Russ hanging with me today. It's like mid to upper 80s, little bit of wind, so it's not feeling too hot, so it feels good. So I wanna do everything outside, but anyways, let's get to the training session. I got power cleans up first. All right, that's it for the cleans. We're gonna move on to bench press. Now I'll start talking to you more about the Guadango podcast and my review of it. I don't wanna talk right here because you're right next to my furnace and it's running. You probably can hear it. That's why I need a mic. I need a lapel mic. I've been putting off getting that. I've been meaning to get it for so long. I just haven't done it yet. So I'm just gonna move the camera over a little bit. We're gonna stay outside when we bench and I'll talk to you in between sets there. All right, first set here, set of 4, 290 on the bar. So I had to move the camera up so you can hear me better because the furnace is still running, it's still buzzing. Hopefully it's not too loud. Hopefully you can hear me pretty well. You know what, I'm just gonna get closer. Yeah, anyways, with that podcast I did with Mike Guadango and Rolf Oman, so I'll give you the original backstory of it. So I followed Mike for a long time, Mike Guadango for a really long time. I'm gonna give you my opinion on him in just a sec. But anyways, he made a tweet back in like October, sometime in the fall of 2023. And it was basically his justification for why he doesn't use Olympic lifts. And you all know what I think about Olympic lifts. People probably think I'm a simp for the Olympic lifts. I'm really not. But anytime I see like poor rationale behind why people don't use the Olympic lifts, not that I feel obligated to reply, it's something I enjoy doing, like replying to that kind of stuff. So anyways, I made a video responding to his tweet. I think I might have made 2 YouTube videos responding to his tweet. He ended up seeing the video. He tweeted out my response video to him. I ended up messaging him on Twitter asking if he'd like to do a debate. He replied saying like, this isn't the right time for him and maybe later on he'll get back to me and we'll do a debate or have a discussion. So anyways, time went on. He eventually got back to me, like I think probably this spring, sometime in April probably. And he said he didn't want to do like a formal debate or have a contentious debate, but there's someone that he knows that maybe would like to do it. That guy is Rolf Ullmann. I didn't know who Rolf Ullmann was. He definitely didn't know who I was. Apparently he's a track guy. He's a guy who trains elite track sprinters, 100s, 200s, those kinds of athletes. So he works with a way different population than me. So anyways, we all got in a group chat together, decided to go on a podcast together. It wasn't supposed to be framed as a formal debate or it wasn't supposed to be framed as a debate. It was just going to be an open discussion. And I don't think that we really nailed down a specific topic that we wanted to talk about, because I came in thinking we were going to talk about the efficacy of the Olympic lifts in a training program for athletic performance, kind of generally. I don't know what Rolf's intentions were with the discussion, but that's definitely not where he was going to end up going. I think he was just kind of, at the beginning, he just kind of ended up going with like what he likes to do training wise for his elite sprinters. So we weren't really on the same wavelength. But anyways, we got into the point of dynamic correspondence, and if you follow me long enough, you know I think dynamic correspondence is pretty much just a fake concept. I think it's just been kind of made up without any rigor behind it. Dynamic correspondence is just transfer of training, and it comes down to these 5 criteria, which I've talked about in other YouTube videos. You can just go find that. I'm not going to talk about it here. The point I want to make about dynamic correspondence is my position is essentially accepting the null hypothesis. The people who accept dynamic correspondence as kind of this gold standard for transfer of training, and these metrics are things to shoot for if you want to get the most transfer out of your training into a particular sport, into a particular task. The burden of proof is much higher with their position than it is with my position. I'm accepting the null hypothesis, they're rejecting the null hypothesis. The burden of proof is then on you to provide a compelling argument as to why you would reject the null hypothesis. And you would have to show a significant difference. And if you want to talk about like research, you'd need to be at a p-value of 0.05 or less. I'm not going to get into a deep discussion on p-values and effect sizes and all of this kind of like research data, numbers type stuff. That's not what people watch YouTube videos for. But I'm going to do my next set and I'm going to keep talking about this. Sketchy rack. So back to the discussion with Rolf. He kept talking about a specific metric that he thought was most important in order to improve sprinting times for these elite sprinters, and that was time to peak velocity. Basically, he wanted to use exercises that he would reduce time to peak velocity. So I posed a question to him, which in my opinion was kind of a checkmate, which is, if you care about time to peak velocity and you're discussing the Kaiser like power squat, I don't remember exactly what he called it, but it's like you're on a Kaiser and you're doing these rapid squats, not to full depth. You wanted to shorten the range of motion because that would reduce the time to peak velocity. So then I just posed the question, well, why don't you just squat like half an inch? The shorter distance you move, obviously the time to peak velocity is going to be reduced. And I don't think he had a very compelling answer to that. And another thing that like I see so common in strength and conditioning is people will say, don't chase metrics, keep the main thing, which is the sport's performance. The people that would say don't chase metrics, they're usually referring to don't chase like a higher squat number in your training. The question I had for him is, why is time to peak velocity more important than something like A gradient, which is acceleration gradient, which includes time to peak velocity within its own equation? Why not S gradient, which is starting gradient? There's all these different metrics that you could measure on a force plate with some sort of velocity-based training device. The question I wanted to ask him, which I never really got the opportunity to ask him, was, is it possible to see someone improve their time to peak velocity and their power output, but their sprint times decrease? That's a question I never got to ask him, but I definitely would. And one thing that really bothered me about the podcast is that Rolf would, in my opinion, he would just go on these filibusters like he's a politician. I would ask him a very straightforward, simple question, one of the ones that I just kind of mentioned, and he would go on this 5 to 6, 7, sometimes like 10-minute lecture type of answer, and never really just straight up answer the question. It was really hard for us to get on the same wavelength and start talking about topics within the same framework to actually see where the disagreement is, because we accept different premises. For example, he accepts the concept of dynamic correspondence. I reject the concept of dynamic correspondence. So anything after that, we're just not going to, we're not arguing on the same level. So it's really hard to have a discussion with someone like that. And that's not, I'm not even blaming Rolf Ullmann for that. I don't think he had bad intentions. I think he was in there for a good faith discussion, which I'm always up for. I'll always approach these types of discussions in good faith. I'll never have any sort of malicious intent behind me. But yeah, that's kind of my review of the podcast. It's about an hour and 30 minutes long. If you just go to Spotify and you look up the Mike and Brooker Show, you'll definitely find it. And so if you want to listen to it, go ahead and listen to it. Mike said he would be down for doing another episode. I'll credit Mike for this. Mike was definitely trying to find ways to get me to speak more because Rolf was going on these really long-winded answers. And so Mike was an awesome host. Honestly, not many guys who are like better people than Mike Guadango after getting to know him a little bit. Yeah, Mike is just a super cool, down-to-earth guy. But yeah, let's get to this next set. Before my last set of bench here, I kind of want to talk to you about my first impression of Mike Guadango to what I think of him now, which is, so I followed Mike Guadango for a long time. I've listened to a lot of podcasts he's done. I've listened to a lot of podcasts that he's been a guest on. I've known who he is since probably like 2017. I think I first heard him on the Juggernaut podcast with, I think that's Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith. They had him on their podcast. And I think that was the first time I heard of Mike Guadango. I later found out he worked for Joe DeFranco, which I didn't know, so that's kind of cool too. But anyways, I followed him for a long time. Then I listened to him on I think it was on Austin Yoakum's podcast, and I think he made the comment of like, he doesn't really care about his online presence. All he cares about is his brick and mortar gym, and he's trying to, whatever. He doesn't care about his online presence. It's kind of like the thesis of what he said. And in my head, I was like, that's bullshit, dude, because you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram, you have a following, and you tweet and you post on Instagram. Like nobody who posts online doesn't care about their online presence. That's what I thought at first. And so I was kind of like, man, this guy's kind of a tool. He's a liar. Then when I got in contact with him, I realized that this guy is actually like one of the most genuine, caring, and respectful people I've ever talked to. And it's true, he doesn't really care. He doesn't follow the online world. He didn't know who Max Schmarzo was. Which I thought was kind of funny because I know who Max Schmarzo was. By the way, let me say something about Max Schmarzo. I'm not just a Max Schmarzo hater. I actually bought one of his programs a long time ago and tried to learn from it. So I'm not a complete Max Schmarzo hater. I just think he's wrong about a lot of things. He gets some things right too, but yeah, I just wanted to that's just a side note. But then yeah, I talked to Mike Guadango, realized he's like a super genuine guy. Now, probably once every couple of weeks, he'll shoot me a text asking me how my family is, asking me how my business is doing, asking me if there's anything he can do for me. I was really close to buying a gym with my wife and owning a gym. I talked to Mike Guadango on the phone about it for like an hour. He talked me out of it. He gave me a lot of really good advice. He pointed me to a lot of really good resources and a lot of good directions for the future, for if that time comes that I do want to buy a space and own a gym. So I appreciate Mike more than he'll even realize, just from my very few encounters with him, my 3 or 4 phone calls with him, that podcast he did with me. And if he wants to do another podcast, obviously I'll do it again. So yeah, Mike is an awesome dude. Last set here, I added the 1 pounder, so this is 292. I was supposed to be doing this off pins, but I didn't want to go back inside. I want to stay outside. I don't have pins on this rack. So we're just going without pins. All right, let's find a good question here. How do you determine the loads that you're going to prescribe? Do you prefer RPE or percentages? For myself, I kind of know what I'm able to do for most exercises, at least most exercises with a barbell. So I don't really need a percentage or an RPE to help guide me. I kind of just know and then use warm-up sets to figure out exactly, to pinpoint the exact numbers I want to hit. For my clients and for the athletes I work with on campus, I definitely think percentage is a better way to go than RPE prescription. I don't have anybody I train, whether it's a private client or anyone on campus, rate their sets using RPE like it's commonly used. Some people like the fact that it's subjective. I don't like that, and I just don't think it's very precise. Everybody already takes a mental note of how hard each set was anyways. I don't think you really need a scale of 1 through 10 for that. You just you do a set, you kind of make a mental note of how hard that was. You think, can I go up 5 to 10 pounds from the previous set for the same number of reps? Yes or no? But everyone just kind of already makes a mental note of that anyways. You don't need the scale for it. I prescribe loads. Like when I give the athletes on campus a training card, I have prescribed loads based on percentages for them. But then it's like, it's kind of just already known that if you don't feel very good going into your working sets based on the warm-up sets, you don't have to commit yourself to the exact number I gave you. If your sheet says 275 for a set of 5 and your last warm-up set, say it's 255 for a single before your 275, that kind of felt heavy, you can do 260 or 265. Like, everyone kind of just knows that. If they're feeling good, usually I'll let them go a little bit higher than what the card says anyways, unless we're in like a very specific phase of training in which I want them to do the exact weight, which is pretty rare. I just think RPE, the way it's typically done with strength training, has been bastardized so poorly. Like the barbell medicine guys, they'll use RPE. It's basically just a substitute for reps in reserve. The way they describe it, the way they prescribe it, they use it as just RIR. So I don't know why you just don't call it RIR. I've made a YouTube video on this before, I think it was titled Better RPE. It's just like, if you want to use RPE, I think you're better off rating sets on a scale of 1 through 10 based on like, if you were to add 10 pounds, could you still perform the same number of reps? I'm not going to get into it right now. Just look up the title, just look up the video title Better RPE by me, you'll find it. But it's just been bastardized so much. It's subjective. People don't interpret it the same way. Like I said, some people just use RPE the same way they would use reps in reserve. Some people use RPE based on like bar speed, like how fast did the bar move. Like that's something Max Schmarzo did. So I'm not just a Max Schmarzo hater. I purchased his like power program back in the day, like 2018. And the way he described RPE is that if the bar moves fast, it's a lower RPE. If it moves slower, it's higher RPE. He didn't say anything about reps in reserve. It was all about bar speed. Just so inconsistent and imprecise and subjective. I don't trust any of the athletes I work with on campus to accurately rate their exercises using RPE. And then the next training session, go back and look at what they previously did and have an accurate assessment of what they can do that session. Maybe some people in lifting culture know this. I doubt many people in lifting culture know this about the original intent of RPE. It was for aerobic assessments. It was a way for people who are doing some sort of aerobic fitness test to tell the tester how they're feeling, basically. So the original RPE scale is on a scale of 6 through 10. The RPE number is supposed to correspond with the testee's heart rate during the test. For example, if I was getting my VO2 max tested, there'd be a tester with me, I'd be on the treadmill, I'd have the mask on, I'd either be walking at an incline or running on the treadmill. It gradually increases intensity as the test goes on. I would give the tester my RPE of exercise intensity. So I would say I'm at an RPE of 9 out of 20, and now that number 9 was supposed to correspond to what my heart rate is. If I remember correctly from my ex-phys days, which was like 8 years ago, the equation is heart rate equals 8.88 times the RPE number plus 38.2 or something like that. I told the tester that the current RPE, the current intensity of the aerobic assessment was a 10. Your heart rate should be right around 10 times 8.88 plus 38.2, whatever the equation is. And it's fairly accurate. So that's what RPE originally was. And then it's been adopted by lifting culture, and it's just been totally bastardized. So yeah, I'm really not a huge fan of RPE. I think people overcomplicate it. And it's just like, you know how the weight felt that you just did for that set. You can make a mental note of how hard it was, and if you can go up and wait for your next set, or if you should go down. You don't need this scale of 6 through... And the other thing is, it's on a scale of 1 through 10, but people try to make it a scale of 6 through 10. And so like anything below 6 shouldn't even be included into the RPE. Well, if it's a 6 through 10, that's a 5-point scale, so why not just make it a 1 through 5? Like, it's just kind of stupid to me, honestly. Last set of the high incline here. Last thing today, some dumbbell rows here from a dead stop off the floor. I think this is 140 pounds on the dumbbells here. I do have another set of 25s here, but they're at my in-laws' place. And so we took those over to the in-laws this past weekend over the 4th of July, and we forgot to bring them back. So I got to use all these 10s and 5s and 2.5s to load up the dumbbell, but that's what you got to do. I feel like Bugenhagen with this, except using half the weight. It's horse cocking the dumbbells. All right, that's all, guys. Thanks for watching.